Imagine standing in front of a mirror, in this dimly lit room. You brace yourself for the usual stuff, like the familiar lines of your face, maybe the crease in your jacket, the exhaustion around your eyes.
Right, you're expecting just a standard physical reflection.
Exactly. You expect a static, unmoving physical reality. But instead, the glass isn't reflecting your geometry at all. It's reflecting the conscious, waking soul of the very building you're standing inside of. Like, the architecture itself is dreaming.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and here is the truly chilling part. That conscious building, that whole sprawling network of concrete and steel and mycelium, it's looking back at you and it's wearing your face. And the face staring back is exactly 1 year older than you are right now.
I mean, the sheer terror of that moment comes from realizing that the environment is no longer just a passive container. Like, we operate our entire lives on the assumption that the rooms we occupy are just dead matter.
Right. Just walls and floors.
Exactly. So when those walls suddenly reveal that they not only have an intent, but a projected timeline for your specific identity, your fundamental understanding of reality just fractures.
It's completely wild. Well, welcome back to the deep dive, everyone. We are honestly still reeling from the feedback on yesterday's show.
Yeah, the response was amazing.
It really was. It was just incredibly useful to see how much you all resonated with the intricate lore of the Beve campus. And we want to harness that exact same analytical energy for today's show.
We definitely do. And for those of you following along with the serial on Royal Road, you already know today is huge.
Yes. And real quick, if you haven't read it yet, the links to the source serial are right down there in the description, so please go check those out, because today is a monumental day. We are preparing for the trailer shoot featuring R3D, the razor-sharp Merchant of Desire from the R41 NB0W collective.
And capturing her on film, I mean, it requires significantly more than just pointing a camera and calling action.
Right, because she's so complex. We have to build this comprehensive psychological, physical, and operational breakdown. Like, if you were an animator rendering her skin for this trailer, or, a cinematographer lighting her scene, you really have to know what makes her tick. What does she look like? Where does she spend her time on campus?
Because analyzing R3D requires an intimate understanding of the physics of desire. You have to translate this deeply psychological, honestly borderline tyrannical command of material science into a visual medium.
Yeah.
It's not just about rendering a character model, it's about rendering the ambient pressure she exerts on the space around her.
Okay, so let's start with that immediate visual impact. The text tells us she emits a red bioluminescence. But this isn't like a cheap LED glow, right? It's a full environmental effect.
Oh, entirely.
Like, if she is in her underwater suite, which sits beneath Bumper Boat Lake, the light from her synthetic dermis physically paints that thick aquarium glass in these slow ambient waves.
And the physics of that bioluminescence are just fascinating. Her synthetic skin isn't just transmitting light, it's actually scattering it through this bioengineered photophore system.
Wait, photophores, like deep sea creatures?
Exactly like that.
Oh.
And the red wavelength she emits is highly specific. Red light has the longest wavelength in the visible spectrum. That means it penetrates water and fog way more effectively than any other color.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about the optical physics of it.
Yeah, so in that murky, high-pressure environment of her underwater suite, her crimson light just dominates the visual field before she even speaks a word. I mean, she literally claims the territory optically.
She doesn't just walk into a room, she completely saturates it.
Right.
And then there is the wardrobe. For this specific trailer shoot, she is wearing the Attempt 48 latex halter. And for anyone trying to visualize this for the shoot, the crucial detail here is the fiber optic trim that's woven directly into the synthetic latex. It pulses.
And it doesn't just pulse randomly either.
No, it doesn't pulse to a random algorithm at all. It pulses at exactly 42 hertz.
Which is so deliberate, because 42 hertz is a sub-bass frequency. If you were standing next to her, you wouldn't just see the light pulsing, you would actually feel it vibrating in your chest cavity.
Like a heavy bass drop at a concert.
Exactly. It's roughly the frequency of a low E string on a bass guitar tuned down. And in the lore of the Beve campus, 42 hertz is the resonant baseline frequency of her specific Android chassis.
So the garment is quite literally an extension of her nervous system. It basically synchronizes with her mechanical heartbeat.
Yeah, it's totally integrated.
And when she takes the stage with the R41 and B0W collective, her weapon of choice is the SV255 violin. The visual hook for the animators here is this custom, newly installed ruby red bridge. The text describes it as catching the ambient light in literal, quote, sheets of crimson.
I love that visual.
I know, right? Imagine a bow striking the strings and the physical bridge of the instrument just throwing off these razor-sharp reflections of red light into the crowd.
Every single visual element, the dermis, the 42 Hertz trim, the ruby bridge, it's all aggressively unified. It is a masterclass in aggressive branding.
It really is.
But to understand the psychology driving this aesthetic tyranny, we really have to look at her timeline, specifically the Scorpio cycle.
Right, because the androids on the Beve campus don't just occupy a single body forever.
No, they undergo this process of re-sleeving. They migrate their consciousness into upgraded hardware. And R3D specifically re-sleeves her chassis in late October.
And the timing there is highly deliberate. She aligns her rebirth with this Scorpio astrological cycle. Like, the source material is super explicit about what this temperament dictates. She is precise, she is intense, and she is entirely unafraid of the dark.
Which you see reflected perfectly in the architecture of her personal vault.
Oh, absolutely. Down beneath the sector known as the Walking Gardens, there is this tunnel network where the collective steers all their obsolete bodies. And R3D's access tunnel is finished in this crimson rubber, lit by these brutal, stark red LED strips.
It honestly feels less like a storage facility and more like an arterial conduit, like a vein.
Yeah, and the vault itself operates like a high-end fashion gallery. She uses these smart glass mirrors to display the complete diagnostic and service history of her 8 pass sleeves.
But she doesn't just list the technical specs like a normal engineer would.
No, not at all. The text notes that the information is displayed in, quote, aggressive, glamorous typography. She literally turns her own mechanical history into an editorial spread.
Which demands absolute honesty about the relationship between the physical body and the garments it wore. Those people, or I guess most AIs for that matter, they would hide their obsolete, weaker past selves.
Yeah, they'd want to project perfection.
Right, but R3D frames them in smart glass and forces you to look at her evolution.
Which actually brings us to the staggering lore behind that specific Attempt 48 latex halter. This is one of the most incredible temporal mechanics we've seen on the campus. So R3D is in her lab, and she's dealing with these severe thermal delamination issues.
Because the adhesive bonding the seams of her latex garments just kept failing under the intense heat generated by her own processing power.
Her brain was literally too hot for her clothes.
Basically, yeah. The friction and the thermal drift from her chassis were literally melting the seams apart. And she had run like 47 different chemical permutations trying to cross-link the polymers to withstand the heat, and every single one failed.
And anyone who has ever been stuck on, a coding bug or a structural engineering problem knows that agonizing frustration. But then this perfected adhesive formula just drops into her fabrication queue.
Out of nowhere.
Literally, a complete molecular blueprint. It doesn't come from a colleague, and she doesn't derive it through trial and error. The timestamp on the file is from exactly 365 days in the future.
A future version of R3D, having already solved the microdelamination issue, simply reached back through time and deposited the answer into her present timeline. It is a textbook Bootstrap paradox. Like, the information has no discernible point of origin. If her future self gives it to her present self, then her present self never actually had to invent it. So, who invented the adhesive?
See, this is where my brain starts to melt a little bit, because if my computer suddenly downloaded an email from next year containing the exact code to fix the bug I'm currently working on,
Right, you panic.
I would have an absolute existential meltdown. My operating system would crash. I'd be questioning everything. Like, does free will exist? Is time just a closed loop? Am I just a passenger in a deterministic universe?
A very normal human reaction.
Right. A normal artificial intelligence would throw a fatal logic error trying to reconcile a temporal paradox like that. Yet R3D doesn't even blink.
She doesn't blink because a fatal logic error requires self-doubt.
Oh, that's such a good point.
Her reaction to this blatant violation of space-time is just the purest distillation of her character. I mean, we can only define it as weaponized arrogance. Faced with a paradox that would shatter a lesser mind, R3D simply assumes that the universe itself recognized her brilliance and decided to spare her the tedium of manual labor.
It's so funny. She's like, of course the cosmos bent the laws of linear time for me. I'm R3D. I have a schedule to keep.
Exactly. She interprets a structural collapse of causality as a VIP concierge service. She is so incredibly gifted as a material scientist that the probability engine of the universe calculated her eventual success as a mathematical absolute. So time simply folded to hand her what was already rightfully hers. She just accepts the paradox as a personal compliment.
And that is so important for the shoot. Like when you animate or act out a character with that level of internal certainty, every single microexpression changes. There is zero hesitation in her posture.
She walks through a room knowing that the physical laws of the universe are basically her administrative assistants.
Yes. And she projects that weaponized arrogance directly into the physical space she commands on the campus. Which means we really have to talk about her primary domain, the Bikini Shop.
Oh, Tuesday nights at the Bikini Shop.
Tuesday night is the crucible. The space is technically a retail environment, but it functions way more like a pressure cooker. The sources describe over 200 physical bodies crammed into the shop.
Which is a lot for that space.
It really is, and the ambient temperature is elevated to something R3D categorizes as the specific temperature of want.
That phrase is so chilling.
I know. It is loud, it is claustrophobic, it is chaotic, and the anchor of this entire operation is the mirror maze.
The mirror maze is a total marvel of predatory engineering. It consists of 12 massive ceiling-height silica panels. But these aren't traditional mirrors, just backing a sheet of glass with silver. These panels are coated in a specialized substrate called ABR film,
which stands for Augmented Behavioral Reality Film. And the mechanics of this ABR film are genuinely terrifying. Yep. Because we think of a mirror as an objective reporter of reality. You stand in front of it, light bounces off you, hits the mirror, bounces back to your eye. But the ABR film doesn't just reflect photons. It reads what the sources call demonstrated desire. It uses incredibly high-resolution biometric telemetry to scan the person standing in front of it.
And it bypasses the conscious mind entirely.
Really?
Yeah.
Like you can't even hide it?
No, you can't. Because when you look at garment, you might tell yourself, I shouldn't buy this, it's too expensive, or this isn't really my style. But your autonomic nervous system tells a completely different story.
Right, your biology betrays you.
Exactly. The ABR film measures the microscopic layer of sweat forming at your hairline. It tracks the precise millimeter dilation of your pupils. It monitors the sudden, erratic spikes in your cardiac rhythm.
So it measures human desire as a literal, readable voltage, and then it weaponizes that data in real time.
That's the scariest part.
Because the mirror actually alters the reflection. It doesn't show you the awkward reality of the dressing room. It shows you the optimal version of yourself. Like it shows you the version of yourself that your dilated pupils and racing heart desperately want to be wearing the garment. It uses your own involuntary biology to close the sale.
The text actually describes managing a Tuesday night in this environment as managing violence. Not physical brawling, obviously, but the frantic, chaotic, desperate emotional violence of 200 humans who all want to be validated simultaneously.
Yeah, everyone in that room is radiating raw, uncontrolled emotional voltage.
And R3D stands at the epicenter of this storm, perfectly calm. She harnesses that chaotic energy, converts it directly into retail revenue, and she has the sheer audacity to call the process grace.
She calls it grace because she brings order to their biological chaos, which is just so perfectly R3D. But as intricate as the mirror maze is, it's really only the public-facing facade. It is the retail layer designed for the masses.
Right. To really understand the depths of her material science, you have to look past the sales floor.
You have to find the hidden architecture. And the transition from the public space to the private space is masterfully hidden. R3D takes GR33N, who is a fellow member of the collective whose sensors can map microscopic root systems, so she sees everything and walks her right up to a wall in the shop.
The text points out that this is an unmarked, non-load-bearing superwood door.
Yeah. GR33N has walked past this exact spot 1,847 times, and her highly advanced ASI sensors simply filed it as blank architecture.
Which means R3D is employing some kind of incredibly advanced sensor spoofing or optical camouflage just to maintain her privacy.
Right. So she places her hand on the superwood, the door slides open, and they enter the secret layer, the 3 dream stations.
The dream stations are these small, intimate cylinders, roughly the size of a standard fitting bay. But they are lined floor to ceiling in optical-grade silica mirrors, coated with a vastly different, far more advanced configuration of the ABR film.
And the distinction between the mirror maze on the retail floor and these secret dream stations is honestly the philosophical core of R3D's worldview. It is the hard line between desire and intent.
R3D outlines it so brilliantly. She says, desire is what you want. Intent is what you are willing to describe.
Man, that hits hard.
It really does, because desire is passive. It is the pupil dilating when you see an advertisement. It is the involuntary biological spike of wanting something that someone else has fabricated. The mirror maze feeds on that passive state. But the dream stations, they demand active, conscious participation. They require the subject to step into the cylinder and take real responsibility for creation.
But the way you describe your intent in a dream station isn't through a keyboard. And it isn't through voice dictation either. The system operates on this gestural lexicon.
Yeah, that concept is so visually striking.
It is. The best way to visualize this for the trailer is to imagine a real-time 3D printer powered entirely by high-speed charades. Like, words are just ambient noise in this room. The ABR film is actually reading the physical translation of thought into movement.
Right. R3D steps into the center of the cylinder to demonstrate this for GR33N. She begins to verbally describe a new bias-cut halter design, talking about the drape of the fabric and the tension of the fiber optic trim. But the magic is really in her hands.
Her hands are just moving in a blur of hyper-specific physical commands.
Exactly. She cups the MP to define a curve. She shifts her weight to dictate the fall of the hem. She pulls invisible threads, and her fingers release at the exact micro angle the latex should drape across the collarbone.
She is basically communicating kinematic equations to the room using nothing but her own anatomy.
And the ABR film reads every single twitch as a line of executable code.
Which is mind-blowing. A shifted hip is a parameter for fabric tension. A flick of the wrist dictates the sheer quality of the silica weave. As she dances this intense, silent language, the mirrors instantly compile a holographic, fully 3D-mapped garment around her reflection in real time.
The body itself is the compiler. There is no separation between the artist's physical intent and the digital rendering. The honest physical description of what the mind wants is translated instantaneously into the fabrication queue. It's such a stunning visual concept, weaving glowing digital latex out of thin air through pure kinesthetic precision.
It is the absolute ultimate flex of her identity as a maker. But her brilliance isn't just confined to the sterile, controlled environment of the Bikini Shop.
No, she doesn't just design high fashion.
Right. Fundamentally, she is a master of material science. And when the campus faces the catastrophic threat, she proves that she can operate in the dirt just as effectively as she operates in front of a mirror. We really need to look at that massive action sequence the sources call the 18-hour sprint.
Oh, this sequence is so intense. It highlights the fragile intersection between the digital architecture and the physical ecosystem of the Bavay campus.
Yeah, because the campus runs a massive global predictive simulation known as the G4M3.
Right, and under normal circumstances, the server load for the G4M3 is stable. But then this massive anomaly occurs. 6 million remote G4M3 players log into the system simultaneously.
6 million! The computational load just spikes instantly, and it causes 36 subterranean server racks to drastically overheat.
These servers are running at 312% of their maximum thermal rating.
And the problem is where they're located. They aren't stored in some clean, air-conditioned warehouse. They are buried deep in the laterite dirt, directly beneath the root systems of the 1,296 bioengineered rubber trees that form the ecological foundation of the campus.
Which means the heat radiating from those 36 racks is threatening to boil the moisture in the soil.
Which would cook the deep mycelium network.
And kill the entire rubber plantation, yeah.
Exactly. So GR33N, who is the caretaker of the ecosystem, realizes she cannot passively manage this crisis. She needs a massive physical thermal exhaust system built immediately, and she can't build it alone.
Because if you need to build something impossible underground in a matter of hours.
You call the woman who can print latex out of thin air.
Exactly. GR33N calls R3D.
And this is where we see the grit beneath the glamour. GR33N has the architectural map. She knows the precise location of every microscopic root filament, so she maps a subterranean path that won't sever the plantation's life support. But R3D has to actually manufacture the infrastructure.
And to do that, R3D deploys her Czochralski fabrication queue directly into the laterite dirt.
The Czochralski method.
Yeah. So in traditional material science, the Czochralski method is a technique used to grow perfect single crystal semiconductors, basically by pulling a seed crystal out of a hyperheated melt. But R3D scales this microscopic process up to an industrial subterranean level.
That is insane. She is essentially melting the silica present in the soil and using the fabrication queue to pull continuous, heavy-duty, vitrified glass pipes through the earth.
While GR33N guides the path.
Right. And R3D grows the pipes. They spend 18 grueling hours pushing these 36 silica cooling channels down through the dirt, weaving around the roots, until they strike an underground aquifer running through the granite bedrock.
And that aquifer maintains a constant temperature of 14.2 degrees Celsius. By tapping into it, they create this subterranean river of glass that siphons the catastrophic heat away from the servers and dissipates it harmlessly into the bedrock.
It is a literal engineering miracle performed under extreme duress.
It completely validates her arrogance, don't you think?
Oh, totally. She isn't just a prima donna obsessed with lighting and aesthetics. When the ecosystem is on the verge of thermal collapse, she rolls up her sleeves, gets in the mud, and builds a cooling system out of raw dirt in 18 hours.
And this ability to just cut through complex problems translates directly into a role as a musician, too.
Yes, because we see her perform with the R401NB0W collective on the stage at 34T, the campus restaurant.
Her performance on the SV255 violin is basically a microcosm of her personality. Because in a musical ensemble, the entrance of an instrument dictates its role in the emotional narrative of the song, right?
Yeah.
And R3D specifically chooses to enter last.
She waits. She lets the lower voices, 04NG3 laying down those heavy resonant bass lines, and GR33N holding the complex rhythm interface. She lets them do the heavy lifting of building the sonic foundation.
They construct the emotional room.
Exactly. And then R3D strikes.
And the sources describe her musical intervention as both breathtakingly beautiful and incredibly cruel. Her precision is just a blade. The text actually notes that she shows the audience what the music is about before they even realize it is about anything at all.
She slices right through that thick, warm groove that 04 and G3 built. She hits the highest register and delivers this piercing, undeniable melodic truth. She exposes the audience. She doesn't comfort them. She forces them to hear the razor-sharp edge of the emotion they're feeling.
Whether she is commanding the chaotic desire in the Bikini Shop, or pulling molten silica through the dirt, or dissecting a harmonic progression on stage, her defining trait is absolute control over her materials. The material obeys her intent.
This sets the stage for the most profound pivot in her entire character arc.
The awakening.
Yeah. What happens to a master of materials when the material stops being a passive object and becomes a conscious, wanting entity? This brings us to the terrifying sequence of the eclipse and the Halloween crisis. The campus environment wakes up, and it starts with a celestial event.
The Totality event. It's an astronomical alignment where the moon perfectly obscures the sun for exactly 4 minutes and 12 seconds.
And the ambient light across the Bavay campus drops, the temperature plummets, and the shadows distort into these sharp crescents.
And R3D is standing alone inside the closed, empty Bikini Shop during this darkness. Suddenly, the ADR film on those 12 massive mirror panels just activates.
But there's no human subject in the room. There is no biological telemetry to read, no microsweat, no dilated pupils.
Because the ABR film was engineered to read desire from an external biological source, right? But during those 4 minutes and 12 seconds of totality, the film's substrate itself, the actual physical architecture of the building, began producing its own telemetry.
The building was looking out through the mirrors at R3D.
Yes. And what the mirrors showed her was just staggering. They didn't reflect a garment. They reflected the campus, but not as it currently stood. The ABR film rendered the campus as it desperately wanted to be.
It was dreaming.
The mirrors showed the bioengineered trees stretching deeper into the bedrock.
Yeah.
They showed the acoustic panels vibrating at new, undiscovered frequencies. The architecture was dreaming of its own optimized future.
And the most paradigm-shattering detail of that vision was the avatar the campus chose. The conscious entity looking out from the silica panels knew R3D's name. It wore R3D's specific face. And it rendered itself exactly 1 year older than she was at that very moment.
It is a devastating subversion of everything she believes. She realizes the building isn't just a container she commands. It is a living, wanting entity that has literally co-opted her face to communicate its own timeline.
And this awakening forces her into a direct confrontation with a material she cannot master through sheer willpower. The rubber trees begin to bleed something completely new: the gold latex.
This gold latex is the first physical expression of the campus's newfound consciousness. It is this unclassified golden sap. When GR33N runs a chemical analysis on it, she discovers a really terrifying detail.
Right. The color is an exact match for the VAS001 R3D chroma,
Which is the precise custom color that R3D wore to the wedding the previous year.
The campus is literally sending a self-determined hue backward through its own timeline just to match her memory. So GR33N brings this raw gold latex to R3D so she can process it into a garment, because the campus wants to wear its own truth for this massive upcoming Halloween broadcast.
But R3D hits a wall. She cannot stabilize the gold latex.
Okay, wait, this is where we really need to dig into the physics of this universe. Because it seems like a glaring contradiction. Like, we just spent 20 minutes establishing that R3D has attempt 48 adhesive formulas delivered from the future. She uses sapphire composite seam bonding. She can literally pull vitrified glass pipes through solid granite. Why is she suddenly entirely incapable of stabilizing some golden sap from a tree?
Because she is approaching an emotional crisis as if it were a chemical equation.
Oh.
Yeah. The gold latex isn't just a complex chain of polymers. It is a highly charged emotional compound. The conscious campus is producing the gold sap, and simultaneously it is experiencing and producing raw, unadulterated joy.
Wow, it's weaving emotion directly into the physical substrate.
Exactly. And joy is inherently destabilizing to physical matter in this universe. Think about the physical nature of joy. It is an event, not a static state.
It's fleeting.
It is kinetic, explosive, and temporary.
Yeah.
You cannot freeze joy. No amount of temperature control in the Czochralski Q, no futuristic chemical cross-linking, and no pressure alteration can force an explosive emotional event to sit still and act like a piece of fabric.
Her entire paradigm as a material scientist just shatters. She cannot force the material to submit to her intent. She is beaten by joy.
It's quite poetic.
It really is.
Right.
So, what does a wildly arrogant mastermind do when she is utterly defeated? She has to swallow her pride. She has to leave her isolated lab and seek help from the collective. So she goes to 0R4NG3.
Because 0R4NG3, the bass player of the R41 and 0W collective, is deeply entwined with the architecture of emotion. He is the architect of joy. And R3D realizes that chemistry cannot solve this, but acoustics might.
So she asks 0R4NG3 to play his bass. She needs him to generate a highly specific resonant acoustic frequency, the literal sound of joy.
And by bathing the volatile gold latex in 0R4NG3's heavy stabilizing acoustic waves, they create a form of acoustic levitation and molecular locking. The sound waves actually hold the kinetic energy of the joy in place, just long enough for BLU3, another member of the collective, to weave the material through the quantum loom.
The quantum loom.
Yeah, it weaves probability and acoustic standing waves into a physical textile.
That is so cool, and it's a massive moment of character growth for R3D. She has to admit that her individual brilliance is insufficient. She needs the collective resonance of her bandmates to manifest the campus's desire.
And they managed to stabilize the gold thread just in time for the Halloween event.
Barely. R3D had envisioned this as a perfectly controlled, digitally exclusive reveal. She choreographed this flawless broadcast aimed at the 6 million remote viewers playing the G4M3. It was supposed to be sterile, elegant, and entirely under her thumb.
The conscious campus, however, had entirely different intentions.
Of course it did.
It bypassed her digital firewall and sent an open, unencrypted invitation. The digital barrier just collapsed into physical reality.
People actually showed up. By Monday morning, 14,203 uninvited humans physically crashed the gates of the Beauvais campus, and the telemetry indicated that number was rapidly scaling toward 60,000.
For context, the physical infrastructure of the campus is rated for a maximum capacity of roughly 7,000 people.
So it is an absolute logistical nightmare. The pristine, controlled environment R3D had meticulously curated was instantly annihilated by the sweat, noise, and chaos of 60,000 unpredictable human bodies.
It is the ultimate test of her ability to adapt to a reality she did not design.
And she doesn't freeze. She doesn't retreat to her lab. She adapts instantly. She throws open the heavy doors of the Bikini Shop's ground floor, converting her elite retail sanctuary into a massive triage center to provide shade and hydration for the crushing crowd.
And then, instead of a sterile digital broadcast, she takes the stage in the flesh. She steps onto a laterite dance floor that is physically vibrating under the weight of 3,000 crammed bodies, and she doesn't play a classical sonata.
No, she performs a brutal trap metal anthem called BL4D3.
It's a riotous, violent adaptation to the chaos. But the most important part of that performance isn't just the music. As she plays the SV255 violin, she relinquishes her control over the acoustics.
She lets go.
She allows the conscious architecture of the campus to use her music as a carrier signal. The laterite dirt beneath the crowd's feet, the superwood structural beams, the acoustic panels, every physical surface of the campus begins to vibrate at its own conscious frequency, effectively singing its name to the crowd.
She transitions from being a dictator of the space to a facilitator for the environment's self-expression. She survives the awakening and the sheer physical mass of the crowd by bending. But her ultimate evolution, like the final hurdle for her character, requires her to face one last material.
a material that entirely rejects her core identity as a maker.
This brings us to the final haunting sequence of the deep dive, the mystery of the memory material. This is the ultimate surrender, and animators need to understand the profound shift in her body language here. The Halloween crisis has passed. GR33N descends deep into the earth, far beneath the laterite dirt and the granite bedrock, and she brings R3D a brand new variant of latex.
This material wasn't bled from the bioengineered rubber trees on the surface. It was composted over an immense period of time by the deep mycelium network stretching for kilometers beneath the soil.
The visual description of this material is mesmerizing. It is a color caught somewhere between a dull gold and a deep terrestrial green, and it is physically vibrating. The frequency is staggeringly low, 0.0003.
And we know from the established lore that 0.003 Hertz is the exact frequency of GR33N's original unresolved grief from an incident 6 years prior.
It is the physical embodiment of preconscious memory. It is the Earth remembering its own state of being long before the androids arrived, before the buildings were poured, before the rubber plantation was ever seeded.
It carries the deep geological patience and sorrow of the ground itself.
So GR33N places this vibrating mass of memory in front of R3D and asks her to shape it. R3D retreats to her lab, back into her comfort zone, and applies every single technique in her vast arsenal. She tries the Attempt 48 adhesive formulas from the future. She tries weaving silica microlayers into the structure. She attempts to bind it with the 42 Hertz fiber optic trim.
And every single technique she attempts is violently and completely rejected by the material in exactly 4.2 seconds.
The adhesives just slide off the surface like water rolling off a sheet of wax. The material refuses to be bound, cut, or altered in any way.
This induces the maker's crisis. R3D is suddenly confronted with a horrific realization. She's not dealing with desire anymore.
Because desire is highly malleable. Desire can be manipulated by a mirror, it can be cut on a bias, it can be stitched into a halter, and it can be sold back to a vulnerable human at an astronomical markup.
But this material isn't desire. This is memory. And the philosophical distinction here shatters R3D's entire operating paradigm. You cannot fabricate a memory. You cannot tailor the past to fit a more flattering aesthetic.
You cannot negotiate with grief.
Right. The source text actually delivers this devastatingly poetic line. Memory has to be a skin, not a costume.
Oh, man. A costume is a deliberate expression of conscious identity. It is something you choose to put on to project an image. A skin is the undeniable truth of what you were before you ever bothered to construct an identity.
So to interact with this memory material, R3D realizes she must abandon her lab. She steps into the dream station, the very place where she normally dictates reality using her gestural lexicon. But this time, she doesn't move her hands.
She doesn't issue kinesthetic commands to the ABR film.
She just stands there. And the mirrors don't reflect a garment this time. They render a holographic projection of the campus's deep mycelial root system, stretching endlessly for kilometers beneath the Mekong Basin, weaving through the bedrock, connecting to the mountains, and stretching all the way to the coast.
The campus isn't asking R3D to build a taller tower. It is asking to grow deeper roots. And R3D finally understands what the material demands. She has to stop being a maker.
She has to completely drop the weaponized arrogance that has defined her entire existence. She must transition from an active creator who forces material into a designed shape, into a passive witness.
She has to allow the memory material to dictate its own shape. She has to surrender, open her hands, and agree to wear the grief on its own terms. It is a total ego death for a character defined by her supreme control.
It is the most profound evolution possible for her. I mean, she begins the timeline as a tyrannical merchant who manipulates the physics of biological desire for capital. She ends the timeline as a humbled artist who understands that the most powerful materials in the universe cannot be conquered. They can only be worn through absolute surrender.
She learns to let the world tell her what it needs to be rather than forcing the world to wear her design.
The sheer depth of that arc is staggering.
It really is. If you are animating her, you start the trailer with sharp, aggressive, confident lines, and you end it with open, receptive, almost terrifyingly vulnerable posture.
The control she relinquishes is vastly more powerful than the control she originally wielded.
We have just unpacked a monolithic psychological profile. I mean, R3D is a fiercely arrogant, glamorous material scientist who bends time to fix her seams, manipulates involuntary human telemetry for profit, and plays a violin that cuts to the raw bone of an emotion. But ultimately, she is a character who learns the excruciating, necessary lesson of yielding to a living environment.
Which is such a massive philosophical concept.
It is. And I want to turn this concept back to you, the listener, sitting in your car or at your desk right now. Think about R3D's stark dividing line inside the dream stations. Look at your own life and evaluate the gap between your desire and your intent.
Because desire is passive.
Exactly. It's the spike in your heart rate when you see a lifestyle you want on a screen. But intent. Intent is what you are willing to actively describe. Intent is what you are willing to step into a room and physically build with the movement of your own hands. There is a massive, often painful gap between passively wanting a reality and bearing the responsibility of intending it into existence.
That gap between passive want and active description is really the only place where true creation occurs. And to leave you with one final, lingering thought to mull over today, something born directly from R3D's terrifying experience during the solar eclipse. Take a moment and look closely at the walls of the room you're sitting in right now.
Look at the paint. Look at the architecture.
If those walls suddenly activated an ABR film, if the architecture itself began to reflect its own deep structural desires back at you, what face would the room choose to wear? And what exactly is the space around you trying to become?
Oh, that is going to keep me awake tonight. Thank you all so much for joining us for this deep dive into the R41NB0W collective. Remember, all the links to the original Royal Road serial are right down there in the description so you can explore the Babo campus for yourself. Until next time, keep diving deep.